We've got one more guest and one more segment left for this week on Bang the Book Radio. That is the Odds Report with Brent from DSI Sportsbook, talking about the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. Couple of games with some sharp action. A lot of interesting talking points here coming up on this segment. So without further ado, here is this week's version of the Odds Report with Brent from DSI Sportsbook. All right, I'm joined now by Brent, the head risk manager down at DSI Sportsbook for this week's version of the Odds Report. Brent, how's it going today, man?
Going wonderfully well. Just looking forward to this weekend, NFL games. It's, I said before, we just love this time of year simply because you get so much volume concentrated in a couple of games, both Saturday and then a couple of games on Sunday. It's great from a risk management perspective.
Well, speaking of a lot of concentrated volume, we had a lot of that on Monday night with the national championship game. Clemson, big outright winner, 44-16. Kind of a stunning result there in that one. How did the book come out from that game, Brent?
Yeah, it was definitely stunning is a great choice of words. It was what they did to Bama was just crazy. I mean, an amazing performance. It was also kind of funny in terms of the way that whole thing played out in terms of just how, the high scoring first quarter and stuff like that is like, okay, this is going to be really, really ugly, and things just kind of slowed down. I mean, it still did eclipse the total for the game. But when you're talking about, 27 points in the first quarter and then another 20 in the second quarter, is like, holy cow, how high is this thing going to go? So that was really kind of crazy in itself. Much like we talked about last week, how with these divisional playoff games, and it's pretty much as soon as you get to the NFL playoff games, you just, generally speaking, you get money on dog money lines. It's like, all four money lines this weekend, for example, with dogs, you're going to get action on those, and you can be, one side and have a risk position with that. And same thing with the national championship with the spread, hanging around 5 and 5.5 as it was. You kind of think, people who just kind of didn't really have an opinion on the game. For those who didn't, they were going to play Clemson for sure. And, a lot of people, especially public guys, they don't want to lay prices like, minus 2 and 230 and stuff like that. So they just, if you didn't have an opinion, you're going to watch the game anyway. You played on the dog. So, the game didn't work out great for us because of Clemson winning, but it wasn't all that bad because, any teasers and stuff like that to Alabama obviously got busted up, and that was a kind of a common play to make. So we did lose to the game itself, but not, we didn't get hurt very bad with the big upset.
Well, and the catalog of props helps spread around some of that risk as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to get all this, all these props that you don't normally have on a college football game, and people who don't bet those props are suddenly betting it. So yeah, it definitely helps out.
All right, so college football's done. And as we've been talking about here this week on Bang the Book Radio, that does encourage some more money into the college basketball betting market because, well, what else are people going to bet on in between NFL games? So you and I were talking a little bit before we started recording here, and I was genuinely fascinated to hear how much more money you get on college basketball now, in a regular given day with college football finished.
Yeah, definitely. Our action probably comes up to double our action than it was previously in terms of college basketball and college football going at the same time. When you take college football out of the equation, that, like I said, the number that we see on college basketball basically doubles. And again, it is beneficial for people as well that we're a little deeper into the season, so you got a better idea of these teams and who they are. When the season starts, there's a lot of question marks in terms of, from our side of the counter, but we have to put a number up. But for bettors, they kind of, have to get a feel for teams and stuff like that. And, of course, the conference play and all that kind of stuff attracts more attention, the big games on TV and all that kind of stuff. And TV is a big factor in as well. I mean, when you had these networks who were tied up with college football before, well, now they're playing college basketball. And, of course, people, if you're going to, win, you may as well watch and win as well.
So for you as a risk manager here, getting a lot more money in there, I presume a lot of that money, a good percentage of it, coming in on the blue blood name brand types of teams, the Dukes, North Carolinas, Gonzagas, Michigan States of the world. So what does that mean to you from a risk management standpoint? Do you look to shade some of those numbers, early on in the process, or do you just, react and respond to the action that's coming in?
Yeah, we don't shade them kind of beforehand. We just react more quickly based on the action that we do take. I mean, we as you mentioned, those brand name teams, if you will, they typically are going to get the action from the public guys who maybe not have an opinion but are going to watch the game. So we're not going to move based before we even get any action on it, but certainly we kind of get an indication early in the day where the trend is going based on our dollar volume and the wager count. So as soon as we see, one game kind of getting out of a hand in terms of a count of about 3-1, 4-1, you kind of tick your number up. And obviously with, college basketball, you have no fear in terms of, going from, like 9 to 9.5 really doesn't mean anything to you. It's not like a 3 and 7 in NFL football or college football. So, the fact that there's not really what you would call key numbers, you can move more freely as well.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you before we transition over to the NFL is, are there any numbers in college basketball you do try to dig in a little bit on to where maybe instead of going up a half point, you'll just kind of move the juice 5 cents?
No, not at all. I mean, I'm not a fan of using juice on college basketball numbers at all. I mean, 2.5, 2.5, and 3. I just, we just move straight through that stuff. I know you do find books out there who will use, juice on numbers, especially around like 1, 2, and 3. They'll do it on that. But I typically, don't worry about that very much.
All right, so we go over to the NFL side of things here for the divisional round. We'll start with the first game on the board, game 301-302, Indianapolis taking on Kansas City. This is one of the games that has some of the sharper involvement of the 4 here for this weekend, Brent.
Yeah, this game, and again, I mean, the Colts, I understand. I mean, they've won, I think they've won 5 games now or something like that. So, I mean, the Colts have really been a hot side in terms of the public. And it's not that, people are sour on Kansas City at all. I mean, not at all. I mean, they were 12-4 on the season. Home field is a big deal in the playoffs. Obviously, that's why teams kind of really go for, to winning the divisions and stuff like that, and also the bye week. So you get a lot of advantages, I think, in terms of where sharp money comes in terms of looking at home teams that offer value simply because the public is caught up in teams that they've seen more recently. So, I mean, you saw the Colts win last week, and it was a very impressive win for them. You didn't see Kansas City at all. And what sets up kind of in this spot is what we have is a public and sharp split with a wager count of about 3-1 favoring the Colts. So I've got the public on the Colts, and I have sharp money on Kansas City. Now, this number did open around 5 and 5.5, I think it was. It got bet down with public money. The money comes in, so we have to move on it, right? So we did get down to 4.5 on Kansas City. I got bet by sharp money on Kansas City at 4.5. We've since gone up to 5. There's still some 5 out in the market. There's also 5.5, and that's where I am as well. So I think I could probably hang around 5 and still be getting the public money on Indianapolis. But we're sitting at 5.5 right now. Kind of respect for a couple of the other stronger books out there, bigger books out there, if you will, out in the marketplace. So and I think this game does set up well. I mean, besides the home field advantage, the fact that the Chiefs did have the bye week, I think the matchup really does seem to be tough for the Colts. I mean, they play a whole lot of zone defense, and you've got guys like Kelsey and Hill who I think can play a big roles in this game. There's a lot being made of Andy Reid and kind of stuff, how his lack of success in the playoffs and stuff like that. But if I look at Kansas City and what they've done versus teams that play kind of dominant zone defenses, they've 6 teams, I think, qualify for that, and they put up 30 to 40 points against all of them. I know, the Colts did do quite well in terms of, the rushing game last week, and that was quite dominant with Mac. But again, it's difficult for sure to predict game flow, but I mean, if the Chiefs do get ahead with that powerful offense that they have, your kind of ground game for the Colts may disappear a bit, and that they'll be trying to play catch up. I think that kind of falls in the Chiefs' hand as well in terms of the fact that they have one of the top, or if not the top, pass rushing defenses out there.
All right, so I'm going to take a guess on this total here. I'm going to say that your money is about 3-1 to the over. What does it look like?
Yeah, it's just funny. I've actually got that written down already. It is 3-1 to the over. That's like the exact number. We're sitting at 57 right here. I think that's kind of the tip of the iceberg right now in terms of where it's gone to. This number did open at 55.5, but nothing sharp driving that, just public money, and kind of be expected, of course, with Kansas City and the Colts as well. I mean, 2 traditionally high-scoring teams, and you kind of focus on Luck and his offense as well. And defensively, again, I think the Colts they've done okay. But I think a guy like Mahomes is really going to have a strong game against that. So I'm hoping this number kind of stays around where it is. I think it's going to bounce between 5.5 and 5. I think the public money obviously is going to continue to keep coming in on the Colts. So for it to get back up to 6, it's got to be more sharp money that drives that. But I think as it is right now, I wouldn't see this. I just can't see this number going back down to 4.5. I think 5.5 and 5 are solid numbers.
Well, I think this goes without saying, but if you see the total move down, that would be sharp money.
Yeah, unless there's some weather news that comes out or something like that could influence. Yeah, other than weather, the only thing that would move this one down would be sharp money in terms of the total.
All right, so let's jump to the late game here on Saturday, game 303, 304. Dallas takes on the Rams. Pretty much 7 market wide here with the Rams a home favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I opened 7, and I'm still 7 minus 115, so I really haven't moved a whole lot. I think out in the marketplace, this number had, opened up at 6.5, but probably got bet up right away. Same thing with the total. I mean, it opened basically where it is right now. We opened 49.5, and that's where we're sitting as well. My count is on the total is pretty much dead even. On the side, I'm about 2-1 favoring the Rams. So I'm getting about twice as many bets on the Rams as well. So no sharp money involved on this, and the public, they seem to like the Rams, which I kind of, can't fault them for. I do think that by come the weekend, we're probably going to have a decent teaser position with the Rams. I think that's going to be one of the popular teasers. Looking at a 6.5 point teaser, for example, taking them from the current number of 7 down to a half, I think is attractive. So I can see a lot of teasers coming in on the Rams.
All right, so the question about this game then is 7 the number that you think you'll be able to stick with throughout and just maybe go 7 minus 15, 7 minus 20? Or do you think that there could be some sort of market force to push this thing one way or another with a hook?
If anything, I think it would go up to 7.5. That's the only way I think it could go. I think the Rams are probably an attractive position for the public for obvious reasons with the offense and stuff like that. And just generally speaking, people aren't sold on Dallas. So even in the absence of sharp money in this game, I could see it tick up to like 7.5. I don't know if 7.5 would be enough to get money back on Dallas or not. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if this one went up to 7.5. I can't see it dipping below 7 or even 7.15. I just don't see that happening.
Is this the least bet of the 4 games here so far?
Yeah, so far it is. And again, we've got, kind of split opinions on the other 2 games with sharp money on the New Orleans game we'll talk about later. But the other game, obviously, with the Chargers and the Colts, we've got good 2-way action on that one. Chargers and the Patriots, we've got 2-way action on that one. So, yeah, this one, it's the Saturday game, and even the Sunday games have more action than this one right now.
All right, so let's go to that first Sunday game here. 305, 306, the rotation numbers for this one. Chargers on the road at Foxborough to take on New England. Looks like 4, pretty much the market-wide number. Is that where you are?
Yeah, we're sitting at 4 ourselves, and 4 and 47.5, and really haven't had to move much at all on this one. The number did open at New England -5, and I thought 5 was a good number. I thought that would be a decent number in terms of splitting the action, just because there's so much respect for New England in terms of bettors and everything they have done in the past, whereas the Chargers have been a very, very popular public side, for probably the last half of the season. So I kind of expected that to continue in terms of people who have had betting success with New England continuing to bet them, and people who've been doing well with the Chargers continue to bet them as well. This game, it is kind of, people have touched on the kind of notion that you're looking at the Chargers now. For them to get the win in this game, they're going to have to win 3 consecutive road games, which obviously, it's not an easy thing to do, especially in the NFL. They won, I think it was at Denver, then of course last week at Baltimore. Now they go into New England. So that's a bit of a, I guess kind of an angle that's getting played up just a little bit in terms of having the Chargers to have to win 3 games in a row on the road to get the win here. But my wager count does favor the Chargers. I'm looking at about 2-1 right there. We took an initial hit on the total towards the under. Now that's kind of bounced back. And again, that was, there was a threat of weather, I think, is what drove that down. Everything looks okay there now. So I think this number is kind of going to, it did bounce down from the 47.5 where we are right now, but now we're back up to 47.5, kind of the initial number. So I think that's going to work out. And again, too, with New England right now, we've almost never needed New England to win. And I think maybe at 4 there might be some perceived value in the market for New England right now. Their coaching obviously is very solid. I think we talked about last week that a lot of professional gamblers don't have a ton of respect for Lynn with the Chargers. The Chargers also, I think it's been talked about a bit in terms of the fact they do have trouble with running backs who catch the ball well out of the backfield, and of course the Patriots do that fantastically well. So I think there's a lot of clear disagreement in this game, and I think that's going to work out in our favor in terms of balancing this chart.
Well, I think it's something that's important to mention here, and if I say anything wrong, please set me straight. But the odds makers put up the number, and the market is what sets the number. The odds makers will put up something hoping it's a good number, hoping that it's going to generate a lot of 2-way action. The market is then going to set where the number ultimately should wind up being. And this one's really interesting to me, and we talked about this on Thursday's show, that I feel like the quant crowd, the math model crowd, is the group that set this number, dropping it down to 4. And I think a lot of other, old school long-term winners with some of the more, tried and true methods that maybe aren't as analytics based are going to come in on New England.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, we talked about it before in terms of how, sharps can disagree on games and all that kind of stuff. And you talk to 5 different sharps, you're going to get 5 different opinions on what a right number on a game is for sure. There are, we talked about different ways of handicapping games, and guys have, different methods in terms of situational stats and matchup stats and your quantitative risk analysis kind of guys. So you can definitely get different opinions on these games, and that's, this based on my chart and what's come in so far, other than the fact that I definitely, notable public action on the Chargers. I think you can definitely make cases for both sides in this one. And, New England, for years, they've been one of those teams where just because they've been so highly bet on by the public, that sharp guys have consistently found value going against them, just saying that, the right number based on their numbers is, say, 3.5, yet the number sitting there at 5. It's just, I gotta take the number 5 when I think 3.5 or whatever is the, is value. So that's happened dramatically in the past, and this is one of those games that, however, contrary to that, where we actually have more public money on the Chargers now, so it's kind of flipped.
Do you think we close 4? Is this where this number goes off?
I don't think it's going to go below 4. If it went up to 4.5, that wouldn't surprise me at all. I could see some people finding value in New England, sharp money finding value in New England. I think the public money is going to continue to go the way it is. So if this number does go up to 4.5 or even higher, it's got to be sharp money that drives that for sure. Again, the Chargers, like I said, the public has shown that they're going to bet on the Chargers, and that's going to continue. That usually doesn't change closer to game time.
All right, so we got one more game to touch on here, game 307, 308, Philadelphia and New Orleans. And we do have some sharp action there in the house at DSI to talk about for this one.
Yeah, this one, it really does intrigue me because the sharp money, I'm going to say right away, the sharp money came at -8 with New Orleans, and we're still -8. And again, it's just Philadelphia. They've been, with Wentz, people, I guess, are believing in them. The public did get burnt with the Eagles last week by betting Chicago. We had sharp money on Philadelphia. So, it's kind of interesting because last week sharp money was on the Philadelphia at Chicago plus 6.5, and that got rewarded. The number got bet back to 6.5 by game time. And here I've got sharp money now going against Philadelphia and on New Orleans -8, and I'm still -8. So it's kind of interesting that these games do get enough public action that you can go back to key numbers or sorry, not key numbers, but numbers that sharp guys have already bet before, just because the money's driving it there. I've got a count, just a solid public count on Philadelphia. It's 2-1 right now. It's not dramatic, but it's a clear public and sharp split there. My count 2 towards the over is about 2-1, so maybe no surprise as well. Now, this is one of those rare games where these two teams did play each other in the past. That was in New Orleans, and the Saints rolled up on Philadelphia with Wentz at the helm. They won that game 48-7, I think it was. What's interesting to me is typically Philadelphia does have a decent defense in terms of stopping the run, but not so good at getting pressure on the passer. When they played previously, the Breeze went for 4 touchdowns and wasn't sacked not even once. But also the running backs, perhaps because of the game flow, Ingram and Kamara, they combined for like 174 rushing yards. So that's really, really big splits there. Also with Wentz, in terms of talking about getting pressure on the quarterback, he got picked 3 times and sacked 3 times as well. So I think New Orleans' defense, again, everyone seems to get caught up in the fact that New Orleans is this high-scoring team, this high-scoring this, and you just think of Breeze in the offense all the time. But their defensive secondary has been much, much better in recent weeks. They do a really good job. Talking about what the Patriots do in terms of passing to the running backs. Obviously, Breeze does a great job of that with Kamara as well. So I think, you look at the Saints, and I know it's a big number with 8, but I really, if you're asking me whether I can get behind a sharp play, this is definitely one that I would say yes to. The home and road splits for the Saints and for Breeze are really, really strong. I think, Breeze's quarterback rating is around like a 99 or something like that when he's on the road. At home, it's like 125. So big splits there, and I think this matchup maybe just is all wrong for the Eagles.
Well, I think this is one, too, and I talk about looking for context clues in the betting market all the time. This number opened 7.5 or 8 for the most part. There was really no thought to opening on 7, which leads me to believe that there wasn't a whole lot of fear of sharp Philadelphia money. Am I wrong in thinking that?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And honestly, I think the what we might say like the true number, what the number really should be on with the Saints is actually higher than what it is right now. I think this number, the right number in terms of opening, in terms of what looking at the teams and all, if you add everything together, I think 9.5 is probably a more accurate price on New Orleans. But just the public money bet, I mean, they just saw so much value with the Eagles right away and jumped all over that. So I think 9.5 is like the right number. And if this number went back up to it, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I cannot see this number going down at all. I would be, really, really surprised. And I've been wrong in the past, and I'll be wrong in the future as well. But I'd really be surprised if this number went down at all.
Yeah, I mean, again, you want to look for these context clues and some of these indicators that are out there, and full knowing that Philadelphia with Nick Foles and what Nick Foles has done in the playoffs with one of the most incredible NFL careers I've ever seen. Between being a rather marginal dude in the regular season and like this elite quarterback in the NFL, even with knowing that, even with knowing public money to hit the Eagles side, this number opens 7.5, it's 8, and it's still sitting there. So again, those things very important to look at out there in the betting market. And I guess, Brent, the last thing I'll ask you about here, last week we saw a lot of low numbers in the wild card round, except for that Philadelphia-Chicago game, and the dog happened to win that one. Here this week, 5, 5.5, 7, the number that opened 5 came down to 4, number that's sitting there at 8. This, like you mentioned in the open, a lot of people forget about these teams that had a bye week, and then all of a sudden they open up and they either take money or are bigger favorites than what we saw in the wild card round.
Yeah, and you look at what the bye week can do to some of these during the regular season. I mean, it's one of those big things that sharp guys kind of always look to, where the public kind of forgets about, is the value of having a bye week. And now you're talking about the postseason, and again, you're talking about the Chargers. You got a team here you're expecting to win their third straight road game. And again, I mean, sure they might get the job done, but it's just a tough thing to do in the NFL for sure. And the thing too, I just want to mention too, I mean, you talked about New Orleans and the sharp money there. I think the teasers are going to be really big for us right now on the Saints and the Rams. I just see getting the 6.5, 7 point teaser. So you're taking the Saints down to say 1.5 and the Rams down 0.5. I think that's going to be a real a vulnerable position to it for us this week. And there's really not much you can do to defend against it. But I think that's something we're probably going to be sweating those two games because of those two factors.
I guess one last thing, we didn't really touch too much on the total for that Philadelphia-New Orleans game in the 50.5, 51 range. What does that one look like for you?
Yeah, and it really, I mean, it hasn't. I didn't really touch on it just because it really didn't move. I mean, like I said, they did play previously, and New Orleans put up 48 points, so it was a 55 that one came out to in terms of the actual result. But yeah, it's typically you're expecting a count on the over, which I touched on. We got a wager count about 2-1 over, but really nothing worth moving the number on. Everyone pretty much market wide is sitting at 51. I think it opened maybe 51.5 and got bet down initially to 51, and I've been sitting there ever since.
Well, we will still have Brent here over the next 3 weeks. Obviously, we'll have a shortened segment next week with only a couple of games, a shortened segment there between the Super Bowl and the Conference Championship games. But we'll touch on the number, and then, of course, the week of the Super Bowl, we'll hit on props, extra Super Bowl line movement, all that type of stuff. So, Brent, appreciate the time as always, man. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Adam. Looking forward to a great weekend.